interconnect a region of over 600 cultural bridges between our lands.
Hello, I'm Alma Angeles. Welcome to ASEAN in Focus. We're coming to you live from Manila in Thailand. Hello, Esther.
Hi, Alma. I'm Esther Adanga from Thailand Bureau, bringing you the news in the dynamic ASEAN region.
On today's headlines, Foreign Affairs Secretary Teodoro Locsin Jr. today said he would travel to the Ukrainian border to personally oversee the repatriation of Filipinos amid Russia's attack.
The Philippine government, through the Department of Foreign Affairs, or DFA, on Friday, called on the international community to reaffirm its commitment to settling disputes through peaceful means.
A Thai court freed a prominent pro-democracy protest leader on bail after almost 200 days in detention.
And the Gambia insisted Wednesday that allegations it brought before the UN's top court alleging genocide against Myanmar's Rohingya Muslims were legitimate after the Buddhist nation tried to get them this peace.
First in our news, Foreign Affairs Secretary Teodoro Locsin Jr. said he would travel to the Ukrainian border to personally oversee the repatriation of Filipinos amid Russia's attack. The Foreign Affairs Secretary said he was traveling with other officials. Locsin also said he's deeply grateful to Poland and they will never forget this. Earlier, the DFA chief said Poland had agreed to allow entry to Filipinos who wish to fly back to the country from Ukraine, even without visas. The DFA has urged Filipinos in Ukraine to not panic and put in place an alert level 2 over the country, which means Filipinos there may be voluntarily repatriated. The palace has said President Duterte's main concern was the safety of overseas Filipino workers there. To date, at least 6 Filipinos have arrived in the country from Ukraine amid the crisis. Meanwhile, equities bounced back today from the previous day's rout, with investors taking their lead from a rally on Wall Street after Washington decided against imposing the stiffest sanctions on Russia over its invasion of Ukraine. Russian President Vladimir Putin's decision to send troops into Ukraine sent shockwaves through Asian and European markets and sent oil past 100 for the first time since 2014 as traders contemplated a major conflict in Eastern Europe. Speculation had been growing for weeks about an incursion, which has stoked fears about supplies of key commodities, including wheat, metals, and crude. And investors have also been fretting over the impact of any sanctions Western leaders would impose on Moscow. Despite a chorus of outrage at Putin's move, the punishments have so far been seen as well short of the most stringent. While the latest measures from Washington target Russia's 2 largest banks and seek controls on high-tech items aimed at crippling its defense and aerospace sectors, U.S. President Joe Biden has not cut off oil exports. The news provided a big boost to Wall Street, where all 3 main indexes surged from deep in the red to end Thursday on a positive note, while crude eased back below $100. The gains in New York filtered through to Asia, where Tokyo, Shanghai, Seoul, Singapore, and Wellington all rose more than 1%. Hong Kong, Sydney, Taipei, and Jakarta were also up. And the Philippine government, through the Department of Foreign Affairs, on Friday called on the international community to reaffirm its commitment to settling disputes through peaceful means. The statement came as Ukraine continues to counter Russia's attack that began on Thursday, with fierce battles reportedly taking place close to the capital, Kiev. On Friday, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, citing preliminary data, said at least 137 people, soldiers and civilians, were killed on the first day of attacks by Russian troops. According to our information, the enemy has identified me as the #1 target. My family is the #2 target. And they want to destroy Ukraine politically by destroying the head of state, according to President Zelensky. Meanwhile, the DFA said the Philippines calls on the international community to reaffirm, by more than words, its commitment to the peaceful settlement of disputes. The DFA said, we recall the UN General Assembly's adoption of the Manila Declaration on the Peaceful Settlement of International Disputes, which provides the legal framework for recourse to democracy or to diplomacy, dialogue, and the rule of law.
Meanwhile, economic managers have vowed continuous measures to help sectors affected by the rise in fuel prices, including 2.5 billion peso fuel subsidy program. In a statement Thursday, the Interagency Development Budget Coordinating Committee, or DBCC, said the fuel subsidy will be released through the Department of Transportation, or DOTR. This aims to provide fuel vouchers to over 377,000 qualified PUV, or public utility vehicle drivers, who are operating jeepneys, UV Express, taxis, tricycles, and other full-time ride-hailing and delivery services nationwide. Prices of crude oil in international market have reached around $92 per barrel as of this week, thus the rise in domestic oil prices. The DBCC said as of January 17, the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, or BSP, forecast to buy crude oil price for this year to average at $83.3 per barrel, but prices were expected to decelerate to $79.0 by the end of the year based on the latest oil futures. The economic manager said the committee is closely monitoring the factors affecting the oil prices in the country. Saudi oil expert Youssef Al-Shamari says he expects oil prices to keep increasing, reaching a peak of $110 per barrel this summer, as Russia's invasion of Ukraine sent oil prices above $100 a barrel. Let's listen in.
So I would expect oil prices to reach the peak or the highest level at some point in the summer. After that, perhaps we could see some slightly reducing in prices, because as demand continues to decline towards the end of the year, going to go towards winter. But from my own judgment, I would expect to see prices perhaps hitting $110 as demand continues to rise under these conditions. The economy, I guess we're going to see more inflation. And that certainly will have a knock-on effects on the Federal Reserve policies and central bankers. So we would expect a rise in interest rates at some point in 2022. And perhaps that could somehow make a strengthening dollar, and in a way that could, let's say, reduce the speed at which Brent prices are rising. In OPEC Plus, we've heard from ministers that they are not planning to pump any more oil above the already agreed quota. So, and we're already seeing some underperformance from many OPEC countries. So that's in fact what makes me worried about the market tightness that we're likely to see in the first half of 2022. Also, something I'm also worried about is stagflation, where we see an increase in the prices without really an increase in the economy. So if we can avoid these two scenarios, I think that we can avoid any economic damage. On the other hand, high oil prices should bring some good returns for OPEC countries, because we all know that OPEC countries continue to be predominantly oil-based economies. So an increase in oil prices will lead to an increase in GDP, also more spending power, and that will also lead to more investments in economic diversification of projects, especially within the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, unleashing airstrikes and sending troops deep into the country in unrest that Ukrainian authorities said left dozens dead. Weeks of intense diplomacy failed to deter Putin, who massed over 150,000 troops on Ukraine's border in what the West said was the biggest military buildup in Europe since World War II. NATO said it had activated defense plans for allied countries, but Alliance of Chief Jens Stoltenberg said there were no intentions to send NATO forces into Ukraine. Take a look.
Мною принято решение о проведении специальной военной операции. Кто бы ни пытался помешать нам, а тем более создать угрозы для нашей страны, для нашего народа, должны знать, что ответ России будет незамедлительным и приведет вас к таким последствиям, с которыми вы в своей истории еще никогда не сталкивались.
Звони маме, говори, что
Я никогда не думала, что такое может быть. Я никогда не думала, что это действительно случится в этой жизни. Мы писали стихи про войну. Я сама режиссер, хореограф, педагог в свое время. Мы учили историю, но никогда не думали, что это будет на нашей земле.
В 5 утра был обстрел, там воинская часть. Конечно.
слышали, видели?
Ну, не видеть не видел, но сильные стены, ну, стекла не подбились, но стены сильно.
Ну, и вы сразу вот,
Да, собрали чемодан, да, у меня брат есть родной, мы собираемся, уезжаем.
Как вы думаете, кто?
Why do you go to the metro?
Because Russian Federation starts the war in Ukraine.
So what do you want to do?
Save our life.
And what is there inside?
We hope that it save us because metro it's on the ground. It's save us.
And here, what is it?
Care tower.
And I must say, President Putin, in the name of humanity, bring your troops back to Russia.
Dieser 24. Februar ist ein furchtbarer Tag für die Ukraine und ein düsterer Tag für Europa.
And Russian leadership will face unprecedented isolation. This is not a question of blocks. This is not a question of diplomatic power games. It's a matter of life and death. It's about the future of our global community.
So that there could be no confusion or cover-up about what Putin is doing. Putin is the aggressor. Putin chose this war. And now he and his country will bear the consequences. Today, I'm authorizing additional strong sanctions and new limitations on what can be exported to Russia.
La situation politico-militaire. Je me réjouis d'avoir l'opportunité de pouvoir entrer en profondeur.
Сегодняшнего совещания заключается в том, чтобы послушать коллег и определить наши дальнейшие шаги на этом направлении, имея в виду и обращение.
Meanwhile, in Vietnam, COVID tally nears 3 million after the country recorded its highest single-day count. The details from Ralph Clarence Cailao of our Vietnam Bureau. Hi, Ralph.
Hello, Esther. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
On Thursday, Vietnam recorded 69,119 new local COVID-19 cases, raising the total number of infections to 2,984,369 since the pandemic began. It's the third day in a row that Vietnam has set a new record for the number of infections in a single day. It registered 60,338 new cases on Wednesday and 55,871 new cases on Tuesday. Hanoi, Bac Giang, and Hai Dong, all in northern Vietnam, had the largest number of new cases on Thursday, with 8,864 cases, 4,171 cases, and 2,948 cases respectively. On Thursday, the national database was updated with 111 deaths, including 26 in Hanoi, 8 in Da Nang, 7 in Thanh Nguyen, 5 each in Dak Lak, Nghe An, and Quang Nai, 3 each in Bac Giang, Kinh Giang, Quang Vinh, Vinh Dinh, and Nam Dinh, 2 each in Dak Nong, Hà Nam, Hai Phong, Hoa Binh, Lào Cai, Phu Tho, Quang Minh, Tra Vinh, Thuyen Quang, Bac Lu, Vinh Phuoc, Cao Bang, Dien Bien, and Dong Nai, and 1 each in Baria Vung Tau, Bac Ninh, Bен Tre, Vinh Dong, Cà Mau, Dong Tap, Gia Lai, Cang Hoa, Lam Dong, Lang Son, Long An, and Vinh Long. 19,062 COVID-19 patients, on the other hand, were declared fully recovered, increasing the total number of recovered cases to 2,339,784. 70.8 million adults who have received at least one COVID-19 vaccination dose, 67.1 million have received their second dose, and 37.7 million have received their third dose. 8.6 million kids aged 12 to 17 have gotten at least one COVID-19 vaccination dose, with 8.1 million receiving their second dose. That's the latest news here in Vietnam. Back to you, Esther.
Thank you so much, Ralph, for your updates. Please stay safe and healthy.
Thank you, Esther. And likewise, I am Ralph Clarence Cailao, reporting live from Ho Chi Minh, Vietnam. We live in interesting times.
Before we go on a break, a 6.2 magnitude earthquake just struck Indonesia's Sumatra island today, according to the United States Geological Survey, with residents sent fleeing from their homes. The quake hit the island's north at a depth of 12 kilometers, about 70 kilometers from the town of Bukittinggi in West Sumatra province, according to the USGS. No tsunami warning was issued and there were no immediate reports of serious damage, but the quake was felt in the neighboring provinces of Riau and North Sumatra and as far away as Malaysia and Singapore. Residents said the 6.2 quake, which struck just after 8:30 a.m. local time, came minutes after a less violent quake recorded by USGS as a 5.0 magnitude. Alim Bazar, head of the Disaster Mitigation Agency of Pasaman City near the quake's epicenter, told AFP that some buildings suffered cracks. The mayor called and ordered all second and third floors in every building should be vacated, he said. Mr. Bazar also said there were reports of some injuries but did not have any details. Air Panda, a resident of Pasaman City who, like many Indonesians, goes by one name, told Metro TV that he felt both the first and the second tremors. Witnesses and police said tremors were also felt in Singapore. Earth tremors were felt in certain parts of Singapore at about 9:45 in the morning, according to the statement of the police. Malaysia's Meteorological Department said in a tweet that vibrations were felt on the peninsula's western states. Vibrations felt in the western peninsular area, especially in Selangor, Perak, Negeri, Sembilan, Malacca, and Johor, according to the department in a tweet. And we have more news for you here on ASEAN in Focus. Esther and I will be back right after this.
Ngayong linggo, itigil muna ang mga gawaing bahay at manood ng Tara Game agad-agad kasama ang mga mahal nating Tara Gamers na kasambahay. So pag nakuha mo yung 100,000, anong unang-una mong gagawin?
Papagamot ko po yung tatay ko. Mayroon po akong pinapaaral ng mga anak. 3 po sila.
Isa kaya sa kanila ay maswerteng mag-uuwi ng 100,000 pesos? Alas 7 ng gabi, dito lang sa Net 25.
Nakikiusap po ako. Maawa ka po sa kanya! Hindi ako maawa! Bakit ba? Lahat na lang nasabihin namin ay kinukontra mo! Ako, si Contraman!
Mga kasama, ito ng mga dokumento. Kailangan nating lagdaan yan. Gamit ang ating mga dugo. Kailangan ba talagang dugo? Dugo? Pwede na chweke na lang. Ang ating pong game ngayon ay pagalingan sa Tinikling!
Hanggang saan mo ako mamahalin? Hanggang sa pagtanda ba natin, ako pa rin ang iibigin, patuloy mo.
Hello everyone, my name is JC Domincel. Please catch me on Letters and Music on air and online this coming Sunday, February 27. Dito lang po yan sa Net 25. See ya!
Welcome back. A Thai court freed a prominent pro-democracy protest leader on bail after almost 200 days in detention. On Thursday, a Bangkok court granted bail to university student Parit Chiwarak, better known in Thailand by his nickname Penguin, who's facing 23 lame majestic charges. Take a look.
ต่อสู้ยังคงดำเนินต่อไปแล้วก็ความจริงเป็นสิ่งไม่ตายแม้คุณจะขังคนพูดความจริงหรือคุณจะประหารคนพูดความจริงความจริงก็เป็นสิ่งที่ไม่ตายความจริงจะยืนยงต่อไปนะครับผมท้ายแล้วเนี่ยเราเป็นนักโทษทางความคิดนะฮะเราไม่ได้ทำอะไรผิดเราไม่ใช่อาชญากรแต่อิสรภาพที่ถูกพรากไปนั้นพี่น้องประชาชนเห็นกันอยู่ก็รู้ว่าเป็นเพราะอะไรความทุกข์ทรมานที่ผมเผชิญอยู่ตอนนี้เนี่ยมันก็น้อยกว่าสิ่งที่คนรุ่นต่อไปแต่ผมจะได้รับถ้าผมอยู่นิ่งเฉยอันที่ผมคิดถึงที่สุดจริงอะจริงอะแม่บังเกิดเกล้า
The 23-year-old who last year went on a 57-day hunger strike in jail was freed on a $6,000 bond. According to Thai lawyers for human rights, which represented him, student-led demonstrations in 2020 calling for Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha's resignation and making unprecedented calls for reform to Thailand's untouchable monarchy drew tens of thousands at their peak. But the movement petered out as COVID case numbers surged and authorities detained most of the leaders. Nearly 160 activists, including 13 juveniles, have been hit with criminal charges under Thailand's tough royal defamation laws, which carry a jail sentence of up to 15 years per charge. A long-stalled bill criminalizing torture and political disappearances cleared its first hurdle in the Thai parliament on Wednesday as victims' families struggle for answers in scores of unsolved missing persons cases. The United Nations estimates there have been at least 82 cases of enforced disappearance in Thailand since 1980, but experts say the true figure could be higher. Human rights activists accuse Thai authorities of involvement, but perpetrators are rarely brought to justice. In an effort to counter that, lawmakers in the Thai House of Representatives unanimously passed draft laws on Wednesday after a decade of delays. Under the changes, perpetrators convicted of political disappearances or torture cases involving death could face between 15 and 30 years in jail. The bill still has to go to the Senate for approval, which could happen in the next parliamentary sitting in May. Myanmar hit out Monday at a genocide case brought against it by the Gambia for alleged persecution of Rohingya Muslims, urging the UN's High Court to drop the claim on legal grounds. Banjul dragged Myanmar before the International Court of Justice in 2019, accusing the predominantly Buddhist Myanmar of genocide against the Rohingya minority over a bloody 2017 military crackdown. Take a look.
In arguing that the court lacks jurisdiction or that the case is inadmissible, Myanmar is therefore not thereby seeking to impede the judicial process of the court. On the contrary, it's seeking to ensure the proper administration of justice.
Myanmar contends that the relevant facts are clear. As to the law, it cannot be possible for an international organization to bring a case before the court by using a state as proxy applicant. The Gambia has provided no substantive response to that contention. This may be the first case in which this issue has arisen. But depending on what the court decides, it may be far from the last. This case will set an important precedent.
When the case opened in December 2019, Aung San Suu Kyi personally represented Myanmar's case at the Hague-based ICJ, but she was ousted as the Asian country's civilian leader in a military coup last year. The Nobel Peace Laureate, who faced criticism from rights groups for her involvement in the case, is now under house arrest and on trial by the same generals she defended in The Hague. Christopher Staker, another lawyer for Myanmar, said the ICJ didn't have the jurisdiction because it was not a case brought by two states as required by the ICJ statutes. He accused the Gambia of not acting in its own rights, but stepping in on behalf of the OIC, and he was referring to the 57-member body that was set up in 1969 to represent global Muslim interests. Meanwhile, the Gambia insisted that allegations it brought before the UN's top court alleging genocide against Myanmar's Rohingya Muslims were legitimate after the Buddhist nation tried to get them dismissed. We seek to protect not only the rights of the Rohingya, but our own rights as a state party to the Genocide Convention, according to the Gambia's Attorney General Dauda Jallow, telling the court. They were doing that by holding Myanmar to its obligation not to commit genocide, not to incite genocide, and to prevent unpunished genocide, he added. The Gambian lawyer told judges these violations of the Genocide Convention are a stain on our collective conscience, and it would be irresponsible to pretend that it's not our business, unquote. In court on Monday, Myanmar struck out at the Gambia for having brought the case before the Hague-based ICJ set up after World War II to rule in disputes between countries. The ICJ made a provisional order in January 2020 that Myanmar must take all measures to prevent the alleged genocide of the Rohingya while the years-long proceedings are underway. The supply of weapons to Myanmar's generals by UN member states must stop, according to a top UN-appointed independent rights expert on Tuesday. In a report to the Human Rights Council, the UN Special Rapporteur on Myanmar, Tom Andrews, insisted that arms sourced abroad had been used to attack civilians, alleging that China, Russia, and Serbia had supplied the military junta with weapons since generals took power last February, according to Mr. Andrews, urging the Security Council to adopt a resolution to halt the trade. He said stopping the junta's atrocity crimes begins with blocking their access to weapons. This he said in a statement, adding that the more the world delays, the more innocent people, including children, will die in Myanmar.
Meanwhile, in the Philippines, the national government will incentivize local government units or LGUs that can inoculate at least 70% of eligible adults and 80% of senior citizens from their target population. Secretary Carlito Galvez Jr., the chief implementer of National Task Force Against COVID-19, said LGUs that can meet the vaccination coverage requirement will be placed under the most lenient alert level 1 classification, citing a similar prerequisite for the National Capital Region. Take a look.
So yung way forward po natin, ang ating pong way forward, we need to re-strategize and require the LGUs to vaccinate at least 70% of the eligible population and 80% of its senior population. Ito po ay gagawin po natin parang requirement or incentivize those who are having yung higher coverage na at least pwede po silang magkaroon ng alert level 1 like in the NCR.
Galvez noted the country has already reached an inflection point in the COVID-19 vaccination program, with the daily output reduced from 1 million to less than 500,000 doses a day. He also noted a low vaccination turnout during the third run of the Bayanihan Bakunahan National Drive from February 10 to 18th, with only 3.5 million individuals inoculated. There are still about 3 million senior citizens and adults with comorbidities who remained unvaccinated, according to Galvez. The Overseas Workers Welfare Administration, or OWA, said that employers who will not accept overseas Filipino workers or OFWs in Hong Kong who have been infected with COVID-19 and have since recovered will face sanctions. Take a look.
Posibleng kaharapin ay yun nga, yung labor case dahil nga kung talagang tuluyan nilang ite-terminate yung ating OFW, susunod ay yung dito sa POEA. Nag-deklara na rin si Sec Bello na i-blacklist ang mga employers na gano'n na naging treatment sa ating mga manggagawa. So, dalawa yan. Sa Hong Kong side and the Philippine side, sa Hong Kong side, labor case sa Hong Kong Labor Authorities, legal termination. And then dito naman sa POEA, yung blacklisting ng mga employers na nagsasagawa ng illegal termination. Pinag-utos din ni Secretary Bello yung laganap na assistance. Unang-una, as we speak, merong food assistance, merong hygiene, basic hygiene assistant, hygiene kits na binibigay sa mga OFWs natin in isolation. Merong power bank kasi nga kailangan nila ng power bank pa sa kanilang cellphones. And then, of course, paglabas nila, pag naka-recover na sila, nakaabang yung $200 financial assistance natin sa kanila. Mga 2 taon na, yung Secretary natin pinapalaganap ito. Kung naalala nyo, pinutos ng OWA board led by Sec Bello, yung $200 assistance sa mga OFW OFWs na natapuan ng COVID. 20,000 na po ang nakinabang dito ng OFWs sa $200 benefit na ito. Pag naka-recover yung mga Hong Kong OFWs natin from isolation, gagawaran po natin sila ng $200 at kung sila po ay nag-decide na mag-for good, at karamihan po sa kanila ay finish contract na rin yung mga nasa isolation kasi nga nagpa-PCR test sila per IATF rules pa uwi, kaya lang nag-positive. Bibigyan natin sila ng livelihood at kung may college level dependent sila, scholarship po para sa kanilang college level dependent.
Meanwhile, Kakdak added that they are studying the possibility of sending a medical team to the host territory to assist the infected OFWs. The Philippines now is better off prepared to exit the COVID-19 pandemic. Vaccine expert panel member Dr. Ronjen Solantes said Wednesday. Let's listen in.
So kumbaga in short, mukhang ready na ang NCR for the alert level 1. Now, it doesn't also mean na pag nagluluwag tayo, mas lala tayong complacent sa mga ginagawa natin. Kung magluluwag tayo, we need to also protect ourselves. Now, it's now the important part here na kung nagluluwag tayo, panatiliin natin yung mga ginagawa natin, yung pag-follow ng health protocol. So, in short, I have no problem if alert level 1 will be. We will now be transitioning to alert level 1, especially in the NCR. Pero tuloy pa rin ang bakunahan, tuloy pa rin ang health protocol, at tuloy pa rin ang pag-monitor sa mga kaso. Yes, I think we are on that process now. Our mindset is hopefully we can be exiting with this pandemic, we can exit with this pandemic. At paka-importante ang pagkaso because this is an important indicator na once we had lower na yung cases natin, we can deal with the virus. We know how to deal with it. And I think isa sa mga punto natin dito is we also have available antiviral agents that are appropriate against this infection. We have oral antivirals, we have IV antivirals. Our healthcare facilities are already equipped with how to deal with severe COVID. So for me, we are better off prepared now compared to 2 years ago or 1 year ago.
The government has deliberated the country's exit plan from the COVID-19 pandemic and now crafting a strategic roadmap to the new normal. The roadmap is set to be presented to President Rodrigo Roa Duterte early this March. Solantes said the public should always be reminded of the vaccine benefits, especially with the presence of the highly transmissible Omicron COVID-19 variant in the country. Here in Thailand, the Bangkok Post reports that the government has agreed to relax entry requirements for overseas arrivals by replacing the second RT-PCR test with an antigen test kit or ATK and reducing health insurance coverage for foreign visitors from at least $50,000 to $20,000. The ease measures were agreed upon Wednesday at a meeting of the Center for COVID-19 Situation Administration or CCSA, chaired by Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha. The revised entry rules come about a month after the February 1 resumption of the Test and Go entry scheme that was suspended in late December in a bid to curb the spread of the Omicron variant. Effective from March 1, the second RT-PCR test required by the Test and Go scheme on day 5 will be scrapped and replaced with ATK testing. The revised program will require only 1 night of SHA Extra Plus or alternative quarantine accommodation booking on the day of arrival instead of 2 nights. Foreign visitors who are required to have health insurance will need coverage of at least $20,000 instead of $50,000 under the revised program. The 2 other pre-travel requirements, proof of COVID-19 vaccination and negative RT-PCR results no more than 72 hours before travel to Thailand, remain unchanged. Meanwhile, these countries have been vetted by a group of experts and proved to have a capacity to move to the production stage relatively quickly, the WHO said. The WHO also announced that it has set up a hub in the Republic of Korea to train low and middle-income countries to produce their own vaccines and therapies, and is expanding its COVID-19 vaccine project to a further 5 nations. The facility in the ROC is already carrying out training for companies based in the country and will now accommodate trainees from other countries, added the WHO. Last week, 6 African countries, Egypt, Kenya, Nigeria, Senegal, South Africa, and Tunisia, signed up as the first on the continent to receive the technology to manufacture mRNA vaccines at scale and according to international standards. As of late February 23, Vietnam administered 192,403,472 vaccine doses, according to Vietnamese Ministry of Health.
Cambodian Prime Minister Hun Sen held talks with visiting Malaysian Prime Minister Ismail Sabri Yaakob in Phnom Penh. Now, Ismail arrived in the Cambodian capital Phnom Penh on Wednesday afternoon for a 2-day visit. After a welcoming ceremony at the Peace Palace on Thursday morning, Hun Sen and Ismail held a closed-door bilateral meeting. The pair discussed a wide range of bilateral and multilateral cooperation, according to a joint statement released after the meeting. They also exchanged views on regional and international issues. Hun Sen and Ismail also agreed to further promote bilateral trade, investment, tourism in order to boost the post-COVID-19 economic recovery, according to the statement. The two leaders also discussed the Myanmar crisis and the issue of the South China Sea, according to the statement. And the news continues here on ASEAN in Focus. We'll be right back.
Alam namin ang iyong pagsisikap. Dama namin ang iyong mga sakripisyo. Kita namin ang pagharap mo sa bawat pagsubok. Kaya sa kabila ng mga hamon ng buhay, nandito kami para umalalay. Kasi katulad mo, gusto rin namin ang magandang bukas para sa kanya. Hatid namin ang dekalidad na edukasyon at makabagong pasilidad sa abot kayang halaga. Kaya huwag ka na mangamba. Sasamahan ka namin tuparin ang mga pangarap niya. Maaasahan mong sulit dito ang mga pinagsikapan mo. Sa aming mga makabagong pasilidad at sistema ng edukasyon. May lalabas natin ang aking talino at mga kakayahan niya. Kahit sa munting halaga, makakasiguro ka na makakasabay siya sa mabilis na pag-ikot ng mundo. Sa New Era, karamay mo kami sa bawat hamon. Kaagapay mo kami sa bawat hakbang. Kasama mo kami sa bawat ngiti at tagumpay.
Welcome back. The world's biggest economies are committed to taking a careful approach to unwinding support introduced during the coronavirus pandemic. Indonesia says at a meeting of G20 finance chiefs. Let's listen in.
Sebutkan mengenai Ukraine, kita tidak membahas mengenai isu tersebut karena ini adalah finance track. Tapi kita juga memahami bahwa suasana geopolitik mempengaruhi atau memberikan spillover kepada perekonomian, keuangan, dan tentu ini akan mempengaruhi prospek pemulihan ekonomi seluruh dunia. Aspek geopolitik ini tidak menjadi isu yang kemudian mengundermine atau melemahkan upaya pemulihan ekonomi yang sebetulnya berjalan namun tidak merata. Nah, untuk bisa merumuskan kata-kata seperti ini Itu saja membutuhkan waktu, karena tentu saja pada saat yang sama di dalam ruangan ada negara-negara yang memang sedang di dalam tensi geopolitik tersebut. Chad, Ethiopia, dan Zambia. Ini di dalam komunike ini disebutkan. Nah, untuk membahas kondisi utang negara-negara ini, memang pasti banyak kreditor yang merupakan anggota G20 dan mereka pasti punya mekanisme sendiri-sendiri. Disinilah letaknya betapa sangat penting kita membangun dan menjembatani. Yang paling penting di dalam presidensi Indonesia adalah negara-negara ini perlu dibantu.
G20 berkomitmen untuk menerapkan kebijakan normalisasinya yang dikalibrasi secara baik, diperhitungkan secara baik atau well calibrated. Juga direncanakan secara baik, well planned, dan juga dikomunikasikan dengan baik. Agar normalisasi kebijakan yang dilakukan oleh negara-negara maju itu tentu saja berdampak minimal terhadap kondisi pasar keuangan global dan dampak rambatannya terhadap negara-negara berkembang.
Now, some central banks, including in the U.S., are moving towards hiking rates and withdrawing stimulus as economies rebound strongly from COVID-induced downturns and inflation surges. But there are concerns that aggressive policy tightening could knock a fragile recovery off course and send shockwaves through developing countries. At the end of a two-day meeting of finance leaders from the G20 major economies in Jakarta, Indonesia's central bank chief said the approach would be cautious. IMF Chief Kristalina Georgieva said in a separate statement that strong international cooperation and extraordinary policy agility will be crucial to navigate a complex obstacle course through this year. Indonesia currently holds the presidency of the G20, which brings together the world's top economies, including China, the U.S., and several European nations. In its final communique, the G20 said that supply disruptions, supply-demand mismatches, and increased commodity prices, including energy prices, have also contributed to rising inflationary pressures in a number of countries and pose potential risks to the global economic outlook. President Duterte said there's a need to regularly brief the public on the government's projects and programs. Meanwhile, the president also said he inaugurated the $14 billion elevated extension of SLEX northbound entry connected to the Skyway system in Alabang. Let's listen in.
Linggon to, nakaraan, pumunta ako doon sa South Luzon Expressway Elevated Extension Project in Alabang, Muntinlupa. It is expected to improve the connectivity and mobility in the South Luzon Expressway and spur economic recovery.
Elevated extension infrastructure project undertaken by the government with San Miguel Corp will connect the SLEX to the Skyway system and is aimed at addressing the traffic congestion along SLEX going to southern Metro Manila. Motorists will now have direct access to and from the elevated Skyway from Susana Heights to Sucat, Parañaque City and vice versa, which will significantly ease at-grade traffic in the metro. The project is a 19-lane kilometer that can accommodate up to 200,000 vehicles daily, which will provide motorists efficient travels, transport of goods, and trade with less time spent in traffic.
In this video we're about to show you, I bet you can't eat just one, so let's meet the Filipino owner of the I Love Chips in Australia. Here's Dan David Amazona from our Australia Bureau.
The arrival of COVID-19 has taken a toll on economies across the globe. Jobs and livelihoods have been suffering ever since. However, two particular small business owners, husband and wife Ryan and Kathrina Alarcon, have dared to defy the odds. Ryan and Kathrina have created a potato fries business with the goal to bring something new, something fresh to the South Australian community. Since March 2020, this small business has taken chips fans by surprise, bringing this mouth-watering, palate-intriguing snack to residents.
So our business name is I Love Chips. From the name of our business, we love chips. And the inspiration for starting that one is we started as a food truck and we wanted to put it on a brick and mortar area because we wanted to expand our business, not only here in Adelaide, but in the other state of Australia, and hopefully we can go overseas as well. We really value customer service. That's the main thing. Because I believe that customer service and product, if you marry those two, you will have a good business.
As you step into the store, the youthful atmosphere, customer service, and food choices add to the total experience. There's a variety of chip seasonings such as, of course, the classic salt, but there's also barbecue and an out-of-the-box option, chicken salt. With this variety also comes the variety of customers frequenting this new food business.
Our business is not targeting mainly Filipinos. We didn't create this business mainly specifically for Filipinos. We created this business because we are here in Australia. We have a flavor that is generally applicable to all cultures, mainly for Australians. So we have different flavors that can cater to different people in different cultures. And also one of our popular flavors is the chicken salt. And chicken salt here is very common in Australia. So it doesn't cater to Filipinos, but to all of the generation and to all of the the people here in Australia.
As the phrase "I love chips" continues to get passed on to the people in South Australia, expansion seems inevitable.
It's really fun and it's really convenient, and we work as a team. And it's just it's right in the middle of everything, so we get so busy and it's just fun.
So what are you trying to bring to the community?
A smile and just good customer service, and hope they really enjoy the food.
So this is a twister, and it's like a potato cut up into a coil, and you can like take pieces off it like this. It's like a chip on a stick. Super delicious. I'm definitely coming back. These are delicious.
Katharina and Ryan Alarcon are just one of many who, instead of being paralyzed by the effects of the pandemic, use these as an opportunity to put into motion goals they've been meaning to accomplish. From Adelaide, Australia, this is Dan David Amazona, Oceania at a Glance, Eagle News.
And finally, in our news, Church of Christ members in the picturesque island nation of Maldives held a coastal cleanup drive. To tell us more, here's Steffi Dewan.
To help in maintaining the cleanliness of the beach here in Maldives, members of the Iglesia ni Cristo were gathered in Bilingili Island to reach this objective. Under the INC program and with the cooperation of FYM Foundation, volunteers from different areas of Maldives woke up early to go to Bilingili Island to conclude a coastal cleanup drive activity. Bilingili Island is just around 10 minutes away from the capital Male. This island is in the North Male Atoll and is administratively known as Philippine and considered the 5th district of Male, Maldives. It lies about 2 kilometers west of Male Island and is reachable by a local ferry service that operates 24 hours between Male and Myanmar. And according to the volunteers, this coastal cleanup drive is very relevant nowadays to maintain the cleanliness, as Maldives is starting to welcome more foreign visitors in the upcoming time. And indeed, this activity of members of the Iglesia ni Cristo helped in campaigning environmental cleanliness.
Reporting from Maldives, this is Steffi Dewan, and we live in interesting times.
Thank you very much, Steffi. And thank you, Esther, for keeping me company here on ASEAN in Focus. As always, Thank you very much. Stay safe.
Thank you so much also, Alma, and stay safe and happy weekend. And that is the latest news in the ASEAN region. Thank you for joining us today here in ASEAN in Focus. I'm Esther Aldanga from Thailand Bureau, and we live in interesting times.
And we'll see you back on Monday, same time, same place, here on ASEAN in Focus. Stay in the news because we live in interesting times.